After the birth of Luke and Leia, Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Bail Organa made a decision that would change the fate of the galaxy. Instead of separating the twins, as originally planned, the three leaders concluded that it would be safer and more advantageous for the two to grow up together. Not only for the physical protection this would guarantee, but also for the possibility of training from childhood. With Obi-Wan and Yoda nearby, as well as being protected, they could be guided in the ways of the Force from an early age, thus becoming a new generation of Jedi with the potential to take on the Empire in the future. Bail Organa, as a political figure, also agreed with this strategy, understanding that the future of the galaxy could depend on these two young people. The choice to keep Luke and Leia together brought with it a series of additional decisions. It was necessary to ensure that they were hidden from any possible threat, especially from Vader and the Emperor. After lengthy discussions, the conclusion was reached that the best place to house the twins would be Alderaan, under the political protection of Bail Organa. The planet, known for its neutrality and beauty, would be the perfect hiding place, far from the inquisitive eyes of the Empire. What's more, being on Alderaan, Luke and Leia could benefit from Bail's influence and network of contacts, while remaining safe. Despite Bail Organa's insistence on adopting the twins and raising them as princes and princesses of Alderaan, Yoda saw the danger in this plan. It would be too risky for both of them to be public figures, considering how much attention they could attract. The title of prince and princess could end up attracting the eyes of the Empire, and sooner or later this could reveal their true origins. Yoda suggested that Luke and Leia stay in an isolated region, away from the palace and political life, where they could be raised without the burden of notoriety. When they arrived on Alderaan, Bail Organa arranged for an old abandoned military training area to serve as their refuge. The site was remote, surrounded by one of the most beautiful landscapes in Alderaan, offering tranquility and security. The surrounding mountains and dense vegetation created a secluded environment ideal for keeping any kind of curiosity at bay. It was an almost impossible place to find without prior knowledge, which made it perfect for the twins' secret training. The chosen location had everything needed. The former military facilities offered comfortable accommodation and a training area for Luke and Leia to be trained. The complex was surrounded by high walls, completely protecting them from any outside influence. This would allow the Jedi training to be carried out without interruption and away from the prying eyes of the inhabitants of Alderaan. Despite the isolation, Bail Organa and his wife made a point of making the environment as pleasant as possible for the two youngsters. They undertook to visit regularly, offering emotional and social support so that Luke and Leia wouldn't feel the loneliness of living in such a remote place. The couple wanted to ensure that, despite the rigorous training, the twins had a relatively normal childhood, with affection and care. To keep everything a secret, only a select group of trusted employees had access to the place, guaranteeing the necessary security and privacy. The weeks and months passed relatively quietly on Alderaan. For Yoda and Obi-Wan, this period represented a rare moment of refuge after so much turmoil with the fall of the Republic and the execution of Order 66. Far from the horrors of war, they found a brief respite in the calm of the Alderaan Mountains, although they knew that this was only a temporary break. The weight of what was to come still hung over them, but the momentary peace allowed them both to focus on training and protecting Luke and Leia. Even with the apparent quiet, the threat of the Empire was not far away. Order 66 was still underway, and the Empire, through its fearsome Inquisitors, continued to ruthlessly hunt down the surviving Jedi. This was Yoda and Obi-Wan's greatest concern, as they knew that they could be tracked down at any moment. The Inquisitors, trained in the dark arts of the dark side, were dangerous and relentless, and with each Jedi captured or killed, the siege on the future of the galaxy grew even tighter. For the two masters, it was a race against time. During the first year on Alderaan, the conversations between Obi-Wan and Yoda intensified, mainly about the future of Luke and Leia and, consequently, the future of the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan often questioned Yoda about the fate of the Order, fearing that, in time, the Jedi would die out forever. In one of these conversations, Obi-Wan suggested the idea of using that isolated base as a re-establishment point for the Jedi Order, arguing that Luke and Leia would be the last Jedi and that there was no more time to lose. It was a bold thought, but perhaps necessary under the circumstances. Obi-Wan, determined not to let the Order die, offered to search for the remaining Jedi who were still scattered throughout the galaxy. He proposed bringing these Jedi to the base on Alderaan, where they could train and rebuild the Order in secret. However, Yoda was cautious. The idea, while promising, carried great risks. Where there were Jedi, the Inquisitors would surely be close behind. Yoda feared that by trying to reunite the Jedi, they would also end up drawing the Inquisitors to Alderaan, putting not only Luke and Leia in danger, but also the Resistance itself against the Empire. Obi-Wan's proposal generated lengthy discussions. If it could be done safely, it would be a great step not only towards reestablishing the Jedi Order, but also towards ensuring greater protection for Luke and Leia, since a restored Jedi Order would be able to resist the Empire more effectively. The problem was how to carry out this operation without leaving a trace, preventing the Inquisitors from locating them. The debate went on for months, during which time Obi-Wan and Yoda began to establish strict protocols to ensure that the search for the remaining Jedi was carried out discreetly and safely. It was then that, during one of these conversations, Bail Organa brought up a valuable piece of information. He had discovered the possible whereabouts of Ahsoka Tano, Anakin Skywalker's former Padawan, who had broken away from the Jedi Order, could be the key to this new phase of reconstruction. Ahsoka, an independent and skilled Jedi, was an ally that both Obi-Wan and Yoda deeply respected. However, there was one uncertainty. Would Ahsoka be willing to return, having decided to leave the Order? Yoda, reflecting on the circumstances, began to believe that the Force itself was intervening. The fact that Ahsoka, Anakin's former Padawan, could join her master's children seemed more than a coincidence. The Force, Yoda thought, was moving its pieces in a mysterious way, connecting the destinies of all those involved. After much discussion between the three of them, it was decided that Ahsoka would be the first Jedi to be rescued and integrated into the new Order. But the big question still remained. Would Ahsoka, who had abandoned the Jedi Order, accept being part of this new attempt to rebuild it? Time would tell. After much preparation and a detailed review of the emergency protocols, Obi-Wan, together with Yoda and Bail Organa, decided it was time to start the mission to rescue Ahsoka Tano. Everyone knew the risks involved, so the plan was drawn up with the utmost caution. Yoda remained on Alderaan to protect Luke and Leia, while Obi-Wan set off for the planet Onderon, where there were indications that Ahsoka might be hiding. Bail Organa accompanied Obi-Wan to the starting point, making sure everything was ready. In case anything went wrong, there were escape routes and alternatives already planned. Onderon was a peculiar planet. Although it had densely forested and wild areas, it also had urban regions that had been the scene of important battles during the Clone Wars. The climate was hot and humid, with vast jungles that could easily hide someone who didn't want to be found. The ancient fortresses and ruins in the mountains offered refuge to anyone who wished to get away from the Empire's eyes. Obi-Wan knew that this mission would require patience, as Ahsoka was skilled at hiding, and the Inquisitors could be anywhere, searching for remaining Jedi. After a few weeks of careful and discreet searching, Obi-Wan finally found a solid lead on Ahsoka's whereabouts. He had passed through villages and talked to some old contacts, always careful not to arouse suspicion. The information came from a local inhabitant who mentioned a woman living alone in a hut in the mountains, someone who was rarely seen. Obi-Wan, remaining alert, decided to follow this lead, taking every precaution not to attract unwanted attention. He knew that every false step could put both him and Ahsoka in danger. On arriving at Ahsoka's isolated hut, Obi-Wan was greeted with caution, but also with surprise. Ahsoka, after so long in hiding, hadn't expected to meet the old Jedi Master again. After explaining the whole situation, including the existence of Anakin's children and the plan to re-establish the Jedi Order in secret, Ahsoka was visibly shaken. The idea of meeting her former master's children and fighting again alongside Obi-Wan and Yoda was something she had never imagined possible. Despite having left the Jedi Order in the past, Ahsoka felt that this could be a new chance to reconnect with the Jedi. The idea of a refuge on Alderaan, together with Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Anakin's children, brought Ahsoka a sense of hope amidst the chaos. The lonely hut where she lived seemed smaller and smaller in comparison to the future that was opening up before her. On Alderaan, she would have a safer, more familiar environment where she could contribute to Luke and Leia's training and, perhaps, help rebuild a new Jedi Order. Ahsoka accepted the invitation, and they planned to leave the next morning, before any rumors of her presence could reach the wrong ears. The next morning, as they headed for Obi-Wan's ship, which he had left hidden deep in the jungle, Ahsoka spotted a group of Inquisitors in the distance. Her heart raced, and she immediately alerted Obi-Wan. The worst had happened. It seemed that Obi-Wan's search for Ahsoka had generated rumors that eventually fell on the wrong ears. Something or someone had tipped off the Inquisitor's spies. They knew that something was happening in Alderaan, and now they needed to act quickly to avoid a confrontation. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka quickly hid among the trees and moved stealthily to throw off the Inquisitors. Fortunately, their ability to hide and their connection to the Force allowed them to escape undetected. Even so, tension was in the air. When they finally managed to reach the ship and depart from Alderaan, Obi-Wan couldn't help but feel a weight on his shoulders. He began to wonder if this could be the first and last Jedi rescue. The mission had been successful, but the danger was too great. Every move was being watched. To make sure they weren't being followed or that there were no trackers on their ship, Obi-Wan followed the security protocols to the letter. He and Ahsoka spent weeks hopping from planet to planet, avoiding any possibility of being tracked by the Inquisitors. At each stop, Obi-Wan checked the ship thoroughly, and they took precautions to stay off the Empire's radar. When she arrived on Alderaan and saw those two helpless children, Ahsoka felt her heart squeeze. Luke and Leia, Anakin's children, were there, forced to live in hiding, unable to be who they really were because of the Emperor's threat. Ahsoka's love and respect for her former master turned into a personal responsibility. Looking at Anakin's children, she saw a reflection of the Jedi he had been. This awakened in her a strong sense of protection, an almost uncontrollable desire to ensure that those children had a better life and were safe. After Obi-Wan returned to Alderaan, he told Yoda and Bail Organa everything that had happened during the mission. Faced with the risks they had faced and the proximity of the Inquisitors, the three decided that they could not continue the saga of rescuing the remaining Jedi. With each attempt, the danger of being discovered increased, and this would put both Luke and Leia at risk. However, it seemed that everything had happened for a greater reason, as if the Force had benevolently conspired to get Ahsoka to join them. Her presence there, in the new Jedi Temple on Alderaan, was crucial to the development of the twins and the new Jedi Order. Over time, Ahsoka grew closer to Luke and Leia. Her relationship with the children deepened, and she began to take a more direct role in their care, gradually replacing the faithful servants that Bail Organa had assigned to the role. Ahsoka didn't see this as an obligation, but as a personal duty, something she did with affection and dedication. For her, being close to Anakin's children and seeing them grow up safely was a way of honoring her former master and, in some way, redeeming her own journey. As the twins grew up, the family dynamic at that base on Alderaan grew stronger. Ahsoka became an almost maternal figure to Luke and Leia, caring for them and teaching them essential values. Obi-Wan, on the other hand, took on a more disciplinarian role, especially with Luke, who showed restless energy from an early age. Yoda, on the other hand, remained a wise and serene presence, always watching from afar, like a master figure and a kind of grandfather in the children's innocent view. This union between Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and Yoda created an ideal environment for the development of the twins, and also for the three Jedi who would otherwise have followed a path of isolation and loneliness. A few years passed, and Yoda felt that the time was right to begin the formal training of Luke and Leia. He realized that the children were mature enough to understand the teachings of the Force and the importance of Jedi discipline. So Yoda began to give the first lessons on the Force, explaining its mysteries, its manifestations, and how it connected all living beings. He also introduced the history of the Jedi Order, its fundamental values and the codes that govern the life of a Jedi, preparing the twins to understand the magnitude of his legacy. Over time, Yoda decided it was time to appoint masters for the twins. Leia was chosen to be Ahsoka's Padawan, while Luke would be trained by Obi-Wan. This decision seemed natural, considering each master's connection to their apprentices. Leia, with her sense of leadership and inner strength, was a good match for Ahsoka, who, despite having questioned the Jedi Order in the past, possessed a strong and resilient spirit. Luke, on the other hand, carried within him the same restlessness and determination as his father, something Obi-Wan knew well, and knew he would need firm guidance. For Ahsoka, having a Padawan was something new and challenging. Although she had extensive experience as a Jedi, she had never trained an apprentice. In addition, her relationship with the Jedi Order had been marked by disagreements and doubts, which made the challenge even greater. Ahsoka didn't want to repeat the mistakes she had observed in the past, but she also knew that there was a lot to teach Leia. Yoda, aware of these concerns, had constant conversations with Ahsoka, offering advice and listening to her doubts. He respected her opinions, knowing that the old order had failed in many ways. Yoda believed that this new beginning should be built with more flexibility and understanding. Obi-Wan, for his part, had trained a Padawan before, but the situation with Luke was different and, in a way, more delicate. In addition to the burden of training Anakin's son, Obi-Wan still bore the scars of his previous failure. He felt that he had failed Anakin, which had resulted in his former apprentice becoming Darth Vader. Now, he needed to rediscover where he had gone wrong as a master and ensure that the same fate did not await Luke. Obi-Wan often sought advice from Yoda, concerned not to repeat the past and determined to guide Luke in the best possible way, preparing him for the challenges that were sure to come. Yoda always stressed to Luke and Leia that they were no ordinary Jedi. As well as being the last Jedi, they were children of the Chosen One, Anakin Skywalker, someone who the prophecy said was created directly by the Force. Their lineage was deeply linked to the fate of the galaxy. Yoda explained that the Force flowed powerfully in the Skywalker family, and this could not be ignored. Both had inherited a high amount of midichlorians from their father, and this made them extraordinarily sensitive to the Force. This inherited power meant that they carried immense potential, but also great responsibility. The fact that Luke and Leia had been trained since childhood was a privilege. Yoda believed that, with the right training and the guidance of Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, the Skywalker twins could become the greatest Jedi that ever lived. They had the chance to restore the Jedi Order and right the wrongs of the past, something Anakin couldn't do because he hadn't reached his full potential. With each lesson, Yoda made a point of reminding them of his legacy. One day, Bail Organa arrived at the training center on Alderaan with a different countenance than usual. He, who always wore a warm smile when he saw his friends and the twins, was now serious and worried. He asked Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka to accompany him to a meeting room they always used to talk, making it clear that something serious had happened. The Jedi immediately realized that the news would not be good. Once everyone was seated, Bail began to explain what his informants had discovered. Darth Vader, the Emperor's feared right-hand man, known for his cruelty and immense power, was actually Anakin Skywalker. He was alive. The revelation shocked everyone. Ahsoka, who had been Anakin's Padawan, was deeply shaken. She couldn't believe that her master, who had been a hero to her, was now that terrifying being. Her mind rejected the idea that the man who had taught her and with whom she had fought side by side in the Clone Wars had become a machine of destruction. Obi-Wan, for his part, was in shock. He felt he had failed as a master. The idea that Anakin, the apprentice he had trained and cared for like a brother, was now serving the dark side and spreading terror throughout the galaxy devastated him. The news fell like a bombshell among the last members of the new Jedi Order. They had thought that the nightmare with Anakin had ended in the duel on Mustafar, but now they were faced with a terrible truth. The Chosen One, who was supposed to bring balance to the Force, was on the dark side, serving the Emperor. This put even more pressure on Luke and Leia's training. Their journey would be even more dangerous than they had imagined. Not only would they face the Empire, but they might have to confront their own father. With this revelation, Yoda reinforced the importance of training not only Luke and Leia's physical abilities, but also their mental and emotional control. The challenges they would face would not just be those of any Jedi. They would need to be ready to deal with the temptations of the dark side, especially knowing that one day they might have to face their own father, the Chosen One, who had now become one of the most dangerous figures in the galaxy. It was essential that the twins were prepared to resist the manipulations and internal conflicts that would arise. Faced with this new reality, Yoda suggested a more aggressive approach to the twins' training. The responsibility that Luke and Leia carried was much greater than that of an ordinary Jedi. They not only had to restore the Jedi Order, but also defeat the Empire and possibly face Darth Vader. Their training needed to be intensified so that they would be ready for any challenge. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka began to focus more on the importance of emotional control in extreme situations, simulating scenarios where the twins would face traps and injustices, all to prepare them for what was to come. Ahsoka, with her more questioning style, focused on teaching Leia to resist emotional manipulation and to think strategically, without letting her emotions interfere with her decisions. Obi-Wan, on the other hand, focused on shaping Luke's discipline, channeling his restless energy into combat techniques combined with deep meditation. Both knew that the twins would face the worst the Sith had to offer. Emperor Palpatine, the most powerful Sith Lord in history, was a cunning manipulator, and now, with Darth Vader at his side, the danger was even greater. Training could not be handled in the ordinary way. Palpatine was not just any Sith. He had destroyed the Republic and the Jedi Order, and now ruled the galaxy with an iron fist. His control over the dark side was absolute, and he would not hesitate to use his influence to corrupt or destroy those who tried to oppose him. What's more, the presence of Darth Vader further complicated the situation. Vader was not only a ruthless warrior, but also Luke and Leia's father, which created an emotional conflict that could be used against them. Yoda knew that if the twins were going to confront the Emperor and their father, they needed to be ready in every respect. It wouldn't just be a physical battle, but also a mental and emotional one. The training needed to prepare them for the most extreme situations, where their emotions could be tested to the limit. Every day, Obi-Wan and Ahsoka challenged the twins with new obstacles, both on the battlefield and in their hearts. After all, on the other side was the worst the Sith had ever produced, and the entire galaxy depended on Luke and Leia being ready for this moment. The Emperor had proved to be the most evil architect the galaxy had ever known. He not only destroyed the Jedi Order, but also manipulated the events that led to the fall of the Republic. His power over the dark side was immense, and his ability to deceive and manipulate the emotions of others was legendary. Palpatine knew how to exploit his enemies' weaknesses, and Yoda knew that he would try to do the same with Luke and Leia. Time passed, and the friendship and complicity between them grew stronger every day. The relationship between Ahsoka and Leia became something very close to a mother-daughter bond, with Ahsoka being not only a teacher, but also a friend and confidant to the young princess. Similarly, the bond between Obi-Wan and Luke deepened. Obi-Wan saw in Luke a chance for redemption for the mistakes made with Anakin, while Luke saw in Obi-Wan a firm and reliable father figure. This union formed the basis of not only physical but also emotional training, creating essential bonds for the future. Over time, the Masters realized that Luke and Leia needed to expand their horizons. After years of isolation on Alderaan, where their contact with the outside world was minimal, Ahsoka and Obi-Wan discussed with Yoda and Bail Organa the importance of allowing the twins to interact more with the planet's inhabitants. It was vital that they experience different situations, faced real-world challenges, and learned to deal with ordinary people. Not only would this broaden their view of the galaxy, but it would also prepare their spirits for the dilemmas to come. Initially, the idea was to protect them from any exposure to the outside world. Over time, however, it became clear that the dangers were greater than they had imagined, and that keeping Luke and Leia isolated was perhaps an even greater risk. They needed a rich emotional background, full of experiences that would allow them to develop resilience and discernment. So they decided that, even with the risks, it was time to give them the opportunity to experience the world in a controlled and calculated way. Exposure, however moderate, was essential for their growth. Leia started going out with Ahsoka, while Luke accompanied Obi-Wan on carefully planned missions. The Masters created situations of calculated risk to test the twins, from complex social interactions to physical challenges that required quick decisions. Gradually, these missions became more intense as both apprentices showed growth and ability. They faced real-life situations, but always under the supervision of their masters, who prepared them for the dangers that the galaxy held. It was a new chapter in their training, which now included not only mastery of the Force, but also the wisdom to face the world around them. 10 years passed, and Luke and Leia became impressively skilled young adults. Although they were still Padawans, both already demonstrated a mastery that many experienced Jedi had never achieved. In the lightsaber, Luke was arguably the most developed. He could already stand up to his masters, often challenging Obi-Wan and Yoda in exhausting training sessions. The Force seemed to have reserved a special destiny for Luke, allowing him the privilege of being trained by both the Chosen One's master and the greatest Jedi of all time, Yoda. Obi-Wan and Yoda spent hours and hours training Luke in the most diverse combat techniques. They created scenarios of extreme situations, forcing the young Padawan to use his full potential. Luke's ability to learn, coupled with his strong connection to the Force, was extraordinary. His high midi-chlorian count placed him far beyond the other Jedi. In a short space of time, Luke reached a level of lightsaber combat that even the most veteran Jedi couldn't have dreamed of achieving at such a young age. Leia, on the other hand, although sharing the same powerful genetics as Luke, had a different focus. She stood out more for her spiritual connection with the Force, something Ahsoka and Yoda soon realized. Her intuition and emotional balance made her a formidable Jedi in mental aspects that went beyond mere physical combat. Under the tutelage of Ahsoka, her teacher and best friend, Leia demonstrated a profound ability to concentrate, which allowed her to perform incredible feats of telekinesis and telepathy. Yoda, always aware of Leia's potential, decided to train her in the ancient techniques of the Jedi Order, skills that most modern Jedi were unaware of. He knew that these ancient practices would be essential in balancing Leia's powers and complementing Luke's fighting skills. Under Yoda's guidance, Leia began to master deep meditation techniques, allowing her to further explore her ability to predict the future and contact ancient Force ghosts. Over time, Leia's ability to anticipate situations and visualize future possibilities grew exponentially. Yoda understood that this ability would be crucial in an eventual confrontation with the treacherous Emperor. The depth of Leia's connection to the Force allowed her to become a true strategist, while Luke, with his mastery of combat, became the physical force that complemented this formidable duo. Together, Luke and Leia were becoming a dangerous weapon against the dark side. The perfect combination of Luke's brute strength and Leia's mental power made them the hope of the new Jedi Order. The two young people, increasingly in sync, formed a powerful duality, ready to face the challenges ahead and, perhaps, Darth Vader and the Emperor himself. Finally, the big day arrived. After hours of deliberation, Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka left the meeting room with an important decision. The two Padawans were ready. They had passed all the tests and challenges imposed by their masters. Luke and Leia were no longer Padawans and were officially recognized as Jedi. The long-awaited moment had finally arrived, and their master's pride was evident. To celebrate this milestone, Bail Organa and his wife organized a huge celebration in the new, secret Jedi Temple. The celebration was not only for the end of Luke and Leia's training, but also for the success of the plans drawn up by Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Bail years ago. The two helpless babies who had been hidden away on Alderaan were now formidable Jedi, happy, strong, and ready for the challenges of adulthood. However, while Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Bail were talking quietly, Bail's communicator was triggered. A hologram of a rebel general appeared, bringing disturbing news. Bail quickly asked what it was about, and the general projected the image of an immense sphere. It was the Death Star. Dread gripped the room. The Empire's weapon of mass destruction was approaching Alderaan. Before they could fully react, Bail's wife ran into the temple, screaming for him. As everyone left, their eyes were met with the terrifying sight of the Death Star hovering over Alderaan. So big it looked like a moon. The silence of shock was interrupted by Leia, who, with a severe headache, leaving Ahsoka and Obi-Wan mostly stunned, shouted, "Anakin is here,